Ahead of cancer specifically, I know it's in my blood, I know it's in my genes, I know it's coming for me eventually, and I've studied this disease well enough to know that we can get ahead of it by detecting it early. And to your point, Phil, when the patient outcomes are the best is when we can find cancers and start to intervene as early as possible.
Welcome to another episode of the HealthCast, where we explore the intersection of healthcare, technology, and business development through the lens of improving patient outcomes. Today's conversation is focused on a critical, often underappreciated pillar of healthcare, diagnostics. Because without accurate, timely diagnostic insight, everything else in patient care is guesswork. I'm joined by Eric Mayer, CEO, and Jay Sitgreaves, COO of New Day Diagnostics, leaders working to innovate and expand early diagnostic solutions that improve patient care. We'll explore their careers, what inspired them to build in the diagnostic space, the mission driving their business today, and their vision for the future of diagnostic innovation. Eric and Jay, welcome to the HealthCast.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. All right, let's dive right into it. For listeners meeting you for the first time, what problem is New Day Diagnostics committed to solving?
So we are committed to solving the screening gap in colorectal cancer screening and even broader vision over time to severely impact and reduce the incidence and mortality for colorectal cancer, which we all know is growing here in the United States and nationwide. And we find that completely unacceptable.
Yeah. You may have just hit the nail on the head with this one, but in one sentence, can you tell me your company's mission?
Our mission is to, again, really empower patients and individuals with their own health information, give them access to life-saving diagnostics, really specifically for colon cancer and other cancers, which are such devastating diseases.
Sure. Let me pose a question for each of you. Walk us through your career journey and what led you to, your development as these young guys into this space, into the healthcare sphere. How'd you get where you're at today?
I'll let Jay go first, so I'm not always talking here.
So I graduated from the University of Tennessee with my undergrad around about 2003. Spent a little bit of time working in retail sales with Rubbermaid, but got immediately into clinical diagnostics. And one of the things I'm a data guy, like I love data, right? That's how I make decisions. And so what I found out very quickly from my first lab was it provided all of the providers with the data they needed. So early on, hey, I need this result, how quickly can I get it back? And I saw that urgency for them wanting to treat the patient, but needing the data to learn how to do so. And so as I grew up and ended up, I think, kind of, working in sales and operations through 4 different labs, brought them up to a good, viable state. I learned about New Day Diagnostics here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I am from Tennessee. But I just love that this company has a sole focus as to what they're trying to accomplish. And, on the other side of the business, just the beauty of being able to help all the other individuals take their brilliant idea, their innovation to market. So we have this beautiful world here that I just love, being a part of. And that's kind of how I got to be here and doing what we are now.
I love it.
And I've kind of approached things from the other direction. I was a, laboratory and bench scientist by training. Family history of cancer, but also family history of healthcare providers. And, as an early young kid was always kind of encouraged to go into the field of healthcare and medicine and really in the hard sciences, the life sciences. So I started off on the bench developing products. I was at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center doing undergraduate research in Chapel Hill and really wanted to take innovations and spin them out and make them available to everybody. That was kind of what I used to say after college and grad school was like my personal mission was to make the complex, laboratory, nerdy egghead stuff easy and accessible to everyone and really make it for everybody. And getting ahead of cancer specifically, I know it's in my blood. I know it's in my genes. I know it's coming for me eventually. And I've studied this disease well enough to know that we can get ahead of it by detecting it early. And to your point, Phil, when the patient outcomes are the best is when we can find cancers and start to intervene as early as possible.
That's great. We'll try to keep our conversation fluid. I have a list of questions, but you guys have answered a bunch. So,
throw them at us, man.
Yeah. No, we'll keep it organic. So, what I heard there is that more than just a business or an occupation, you guys have a a personal connection with Jay's attributes with the way his analytical mind thinks, and your family history, and also coming from a scientific background, and more than just a clock in, clock out job. This is something that is connected to who you are as individuals. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Jay, I don't know if you want to tell your personal story, but I mean, this affects all of us.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a cancer survivor, different type of cancer. But for me, that's kind of why when we're looking at getting Cola Health, our main product, and Cola Health LDT to our market, it's really about protecting the patient. We don't want to make it a soapbox, but that's real. Like we can protect patients and prevent the cancers by looking at the actual data. So it does have a heartfelt meaning for me because the earlier you can find it, the better off we're going to be able to let the patients continue their journey in life.
Yeah. One of the I appreciate your sharing your story, Jay. In my research on New Day Diagnostics, one of the things I came across somewhere in a website or LinkedIn or something was, by shifting the diagnostic window to an earlier stage, we don't just find diseases, we help change the prognosis. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. And this is it's an anecdote, but, again, with the family history that we have, my mom, who, of course, very proud of her son and all the work that I've been doing, she
Of
wanted to try
course.
this test out, right? Yeah, as moms tend
Yeah.
to do. So last year when we launched the test, upon the FDA approval and then making the improvements in our lab that we've developed, she wanted to try it out. So she took the blood test and she also took the stool test next to each other, basically right at the same time. The stool test was negative, but our blood test was positive. And she scheduled her follow-up colonoscopy. And she tells this story. She's got a video on it, so I'm not giving any HIPAA protected information. She has volunteered all of this. But, she did her follow-up colonoscopy last October, and the gastroenterologist found and removed two 3 millimeter polyps that the stool test missed that ours picked up. So, yes,
Yeah.
Phil, by shifting that window earlier, finding the precancerous lesions, the stage zeros, if you will, and removing those polyps before they progress to cancer, we can even start talking about prevention.
I love it. I love it. That's great. It's nice also to hear, as a clinician, I've had to get my head around that both we serve patients, but at the hospital setting is still a business, and we're still empathetic and balancing those out. Sounds like you guys do that as well. And awesome job with that, taking care of your mom and taking care of your patients.
Thank you. And what's interesting, Phil, is that, we want to identify the correct individuals for confirmatory colonoscopy. We want people getting their colonoscopies when they need them. That's still gold standard. A trained gastroenterologist looking in there. We want to get the right people there because that's how we're going to help these folks. Actionable findings under the scope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something in the clinic room, getting, particularly for me, in my experience, getting maybe men who don't have a family history, to participate in colon cancer screening, whether it's colonoscopy or otherwise. And they think, I call it that "not me" syndrome that a lot of us struggle with. Not me. But the reality is that that prevalence is large. This sounds like another tool that we should be exploring further.
Yeah. Well, Jace, you're talking with Man Up for Cancer, Cheeky Butts, like all of these advocacy groups, because you're right. A lot of us, we don't talk about this stuff very much. We're like, we pretend we're too macho for it, I guess.
No, I mean, you're right. Like there's that stigma is attached. And that's why we want to work with certain advocacy groups to kind of help make awareness of like solutions that might be out there, as well as those that understand, perhaps you're not me scenario, but make them understand like this is a risk for them and perhaps they're not aware of it. And so, March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. There's a lot of effort we're going to take as well as lots of other organizations to just make sure that, the population is aware of what's going on and, provide them with solutions to this.
What makes New Day Diagnostics different in today's competitive diagnostic landscape?
Well, I would say first and foremost, we are a scientific led company. We're not Wall Street bankers that are trying to just make a dollar and, hit quarterly earnings reports. We built this technology, we built this business, we built this around the science and the patient centric approach. I think that separates us first and foremost. And then, again, kind of diving into the egghead in me, we're taking a very different approach to cancer detection. Yeah, I see you
I
laughing
like that.
there.
I like that.
Yeah.
It took me a second.
Well, I got to know at UT Medical Center right here. I got to know the former chair of surgery and chief of medicine, and he made this statement. This was about a decade ago. He said, cancer is a complex biological problem. He goes, there's not going to be a silver bullet for this. He goes, we have to have a complex solution here. So we've always approached this of looking at genetics, looking at the active disease, so the biology of from genes to what genes get expressed into proteins to then gets metabolized. Because if we're just looking at mutations, right, you don't know if that's actually predictive of the disease taking place. So we have always tried to look, deeper. We've always tried to really follow what's happening biologically and get to sort of unlock the active disease states. And I think that's a different approach than what we've seen by others in the market, whether they're looking for breast cancer, BRCA1, BRCA2 genes, whether they're looking at, the Grail galleries that have 50 cancers that they look at. We have taken a very methodical, targeted approach to try to decipher what's happening with the inside the colon.
Yeah. Who are your primary customers? Providers, employers, health systems, or patients?
So we're launching honestly for everyone, but presently, the population we're going after is DTC. And so we want, consumers or patients to say, hey, look, I have this need. I have the desire to take this test and allow them the opportunity. There's so many kind of roadblocks that patients, consumers have to get whatever test it is.
Yeah.
There's several platforms right now that are offering these tests. And that's kind of our mission, is to make our test available to everyone that can. There's always a physician behind the scenes who is signing off on this, but we want to allow those that have the desire to take this test, the ability and accessibility to take said test.
DTC, direct to consumer.
We are going DTC, yes.
Okay, yeah. Where I find, just thinking, as you guys were mentioning, the advocacy groups you work with, and March being Colon Cancer Awareness Month, where I've been able to make some traction is I try to find whatever behavior modification I'm trying to promote in the patient. I try to find their why, and usually it comes down to family. I mean, that's the biggest one for most of us. So if I find a guy, usually, say a young guy, and if I consider taking care of your health the responsibility once you have a family. And a family it may be children, it may be taking care of older folks, significant other in your life. Well, you use family in the larger context. But, and then I put it back on myself. I said, well, my job's to, if you're looking out for other people, my job's to look out for you. So kind of opening the conversation and putting a little bit of pressure on them from a supportive way.
I think that's exactly, kind of our philosophy as well. We preach family first here, and we're not talking about like the new day family. We talk about you got to have things going well at home with your kids or your significant other, because when you're here, we want your head to be here, not worrying about what's happening at home. So we've always taken that family centric approach. And I think that also kind of, parlays into how we approach healthcare and how we kind of try to get behavior modification, if you will, basically saying, look, this colon cancer is affecting more and more younger people, below age 50. Now we're seeing below age 45. They're not even in the screening guidelines. No one's talking to us. I'm 42 now. I just had to think about that. In December. Yeah. Because of the family history, I had a colonoscopy. I did my first one before age 40, but I had to pay for that out of pocket, right? That was me taking control of it myself because I have two little kids at home. I want to make sure I'm there for them. And I want to see not only grandkids, I want to see great grandkids and great grandkids, right? Yeah, I feel you. Phil, I think that's you hit the nail on the head.
Proactive approach to health. Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk to me about technology and the work that you do. Where is it fitting in with speed, accuracy, accessibility?
Great question. So what we've done is we've really tried to make sure that all of our technology fits into existing labs nationwide and worldwide. And we all know and we all experience globally this big pandemic about 6 years ago. Gosh, did that shut down the entire planet. But every single lab in the world is stocked full of what you guys may remember, PCR. PCR was the word you heard everywhere. We really made sure that we built all of our tests to fit on existing equipment, so we didn't have to try to reinvent the wheel or change workflows in the lab. And that's what has allowed this accessibility to explode. Any lab in the world can run this test. Any phlebotomy center, any primary care physician, anybody in the world can draw a tube of blood out of the arm and get it sent out. So there's no specialized equipment. There's no special things like this. The accuracy itself, again, it's really good, better than better than all of the other blood tests out there for colon cancer at picking up the early stage polyps. There are more accurate stool tests. They really are. The stool test, the Cologuard is a great test. Okay. It's sensitive. It's specific. However, it's a stool test. So there are adherence and accessibility issues. The best test is actually the one a patient will take. So, exactly. As you know, Phil, right? If it's going to, if the patient's not going to return the test, then the accuracy is zero, effectively zero. So, we don't like to get kind of hung up on accuracy numbers. We like to say that the best test is one that somebody will take. And the good news is our blood test picks up a lot of the precancerous polyps, more so than other blood tests. And we have a very high negative predictive value. 99.8% negative predictive values. If you do get I like to kind of joke it in terms of the pun, but you know, if you get a negative test result, you're cola healthy. You can rest assured and you can screen again next year.
Yeah. How do you measure success? How does New Day Diagnostics measure success?
We've talked about this a lot, and there are metrics in terms of, how many people we can screen in a year or, how many dollars we can make, right? That's not really what we see as success. And that's why our longer term vision is to influence and reduce incidence and mortality. We want to be the world leaders in liquid biopsy for sure, but we want to make sure that that liquid biopsy is actually impacting and starting to bring down the mortality rate from this disease, and especially in the age group that it's being affected right now, which is, those folks that are under age 50, and now we're seeing it under age 45. And those people are not in the screening conversation. It makes no sense. And that's what we want to change.
Can you guys maybe provide some education for me? Why is it simply nutrition and our nutrition in the United States that's the causative factor there? Or I've read a little bit about it. And I've heard that. I don't know if you could hang your hat on that entirely. Talk to me about.
When I talk to gastroenterologists and researchers, and of course, we're doing research, underlying causes, diet for sure. Now, we can't 100% say that's the pin, right? And put the nail in the coffin. Diet, our behaviors, lack of exercise, we're sitting in front of computers or sitting on the bench doing the bench science. We don't have enough fiber in our diets anymore. We have way too much sugars. I mean, you can just name everything. And we are also exporting this lifestyle around the globe. So other developing nations are starting to pick up our Western habits, and that's why you're seeing colon cancer rise there as well. And I know you've done a lot of research kind of on your own in health, wellness, and a lot of it is the food we eat. Some of it is the genetics. Here, Jay, sorry, I'm monopolizing the
Yeah,
conversation.
no, very jealous of the scientists. I'm not one by nature, but honestly, with the same thing, whenever I speak to, any of the gastro physicians, providers, inevitably they're pointing at basically our Western diet and our lifestyle as to perhaps the reasons as to why this is the case. And I think there's a lot more research to be done. But that's what we want to be able to do is just provide a screen for those to kind of close that gap and just ensure the population has along the way.
Yeah. Fellas, let me pause for 1 second here, and we can do some editing. Gotta double check that I'm recording. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. This is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
We can go again.
My goodness. Let's see what we got here. I got a couple things open here. I believe we are. We are. We'll just edit that out. And we'll just continue from there. Thanks, guys. Okay.
No problem.
Nice. Let me get myself situated here. Okay. Whew. What milestones or wins are you most proud of?
Man, I gotta think about that one for a second. I mean, I'd say really the first launch was super exciting. I mean, having been sort of in the R&D phase for a decade and then being able to actually test our first patient, I think was a huge milestone. I remember it's kind of a mixed bag of emotions, but our first positive patient was a huge milestone. We found something.
Sure.
And then that patient calling us back, taking the time out of their day after their colonoscopy to call us and say, guys, I wasn't going to do anything, but I took your test. I found it on Google. I took the
Yeah.
test. It was positive, and there was a colon cancer, a stage 3 colon cancer that had probably been growing in that person's bowels for 5, 6, 7 years, undetected. And, hearing that story and having this person basically credit us with saving his life was extremely powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's pause there. And in terms of as a business, so was this you said first customer, 10 years of R&D. Was this help me out with my verbiage, but like side hustle that then evolved into your a full-time business? Did you have another role or just
This
all eggs in
this
one basket and then it went to market 10 years later?
Yeah, so this was all eggs in the basket. We had started this company on colon cancer detection, and interestingly, as the side hustle was doing veterinary testing for canines and other animals. That company spun out and became its own veterinary lab in 2008. So that the colon cancer work could continue. And I got to the company and took over the company in 2015, having run biz dev for the company before that. Again, we were in R&D mode for so long. because this is, it's a difficult disease to tackle. This is an expensive and time consuming to do clinical trials. We ended up doing a merger with another company. We ended up acquiring patent portfolios and approved products from a third company. We've been through that ringer on the corporate side as well. But it's been a long journey and, very, very rewarding now the real fun begins. Now the real uphill begins to actually get this test out to patients.
Sure, sure. What are the biggest operational or market challenges right now?
That's Jay's world.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest piece is, other than the awareness which we're creating and other organizations are creating, is just the ability to have patients access said test. And so we're building kind of a good strategy along the way to ensure not just DTC, but also like community health centers, rural health centers who are extremely underserved right now,
Yeah.
have the ability to access the test, and then kind of the follow up with those partners that we're working with, make sure they get good follow ups from the gastro providers as well. So, inevitably, it all kind of goes back to our simple, mission statement of like closing the screening gap, and just working with those groups to make sure we get that.
Yeah. How do you balance innovation with compliance in healthcare? Does HIPAA play a role in what you do? And like, maybe not HIPAA specifically, but just the legality in healthcare that we see. How does that work out with innovation?
Yeah, it's, let's just call it what it is. They make innovation difficult, but it makes innovation better, right? We need to have guardrails. We need to make sure that anything new is safe and effective, and cost effective as well, and accessible. But, at the same time, those same rules and regulations, they can be stifling, because again, it takes 10 years to get through the clinical trial pathway unless you're a big multi-billion-dollar company that can just throw money at a clinical trial. We have regulations from the federal government, from multiple federal agencies. We get inspected and we comply with Tennessee Department of Health and state level, CMS, Medicare, Medicaid. Of course, the FDA, international regulations, in vitro diagnostic regulations and directives that are international as well. And then each country that we work with have their own set of rules and regulations. So, we don't see these as being bad, negative. We see them as helping us create a better product and helping the patient. But man, it is time consuming, expensive, and complex. But that's what we signed up for. That's the world we knew we were getting into.
I love that attitude. Yeah, it is what it is, and you're moving forward.
That's right. That's
I
right.
got you.
You figure out how to work with it to make things better.
Very good.
I think we should mention also that New Day Diagnostics deals with more than just colon cancer, though, right? There's other testing. Yeah, we should touch upon those while I have you on. And can you talk some about maybe some of the, at least some of the bigger ones that you guys also, the cancers and diagnoses that you guys work with?
Yes, absolutely. We've really focused on a large portfolio of cancer biomarkers in colorectal, in liver, hepatocellular carcinoma. There is a lung cancer panel that is CE marked outside the United States, and we would love to work with a partner to bring that to the United States and run clinicals here. Colorectal, liver, lung, ovarian, prostate, and then we also have a breast cancer patent that we've licensed to a German company that's building a companion diagnostic for chemotherapy treatment selection. So, we are in some of the major cancers, but our initial focus is colorectal because that's the epidemic that's growing, especially in our age group. And then on top of that, I'll let you kind of describe some of the cool stuff going on in the bioresearch division. That's more of our skunk works. That's more the side hustle kind of stuff, if you will.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's I don't know how openly I'm allowed to talk about it, but yeah, we've
Can't mention any names.
we've landed some very large deals recently, and we're continuing to grow. There's some obviously bigger opportunities for us to kind of strengthen that, and that's what we want to be. Is there's this beautiful world in the bio research where we obviously have one large thing going on now, one project, and then there's several other companies that have, as I mentioned earlier, innovative ideas that are brilliant, going to help the populations. I'm pretty excited about it. I know it was a little subjective, but there's this wide world where New Day can take place in helping the population. And I think that's honestly just a beautiful place to be as a company.
Yeah, a lot of these guys, they'll, these are other developers that some are way bigger than us and they like working with our team. Some are our size, some are just brand new idea startups, and they'll bring tech to us or they'll bring a new diagnostic analyzer. We'll help them validate it. We'll help them do the bench testing. We'll help them make sure that the stuff works before they then go and do a clinical trial.
Yeah. Where do you see New Day Diagnostics in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So we see ourselves as being the leader in liquid biopsy, not just in colorectal, but in all of the other solid tumors that I just described. And we also see ourselves launching internationally. We're already starting in some of the large developing nations that have, let's say, low awareness of colon cancer. But as we've said, as we export Americans' diet, they have a growing problem. And in the next 5 years, they are going to have a very big problem on their hands. We're launching in India. We're working through approvals right now in Mexico, and we do see ourselves in 3 to 5 years as being the leader in liquid biopsy.
Eric, can you go back a couple sentences? Say that about you mentioned a larger problem, but I just want to catch the what preceded that.
Yeah, so what preceded that is again American lifestyle and our diets really being spread around the world. And as high fructose corn syrup, whatever you want to point to, right? We all know that hey, we
I
probably
tell my
should not be
patients most
eating a
problem
lot of
like
it.
multifactorials what I use for it's not one culprit, but it's all these things in combination.
Correct, correct. And as more populations around the world adopt that lifestyle, adopt that diet, they are going to start seeing their incidence rise just like we did. And so
Yeah.
if we want to help them get ahead of it so it doesn't become the epidemic that's already happened here over the last 50 years.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. How will AI automate or decentralize care in diagnostics? Where does that play out?
I think there's a bad. I saw you looking at me. So actually, there's a beautiful thing in Vibe right now. There's just so much AI out there, including an AI dog, which was pretty cool that I saw. But no, within healthcare, I think there's just so much that's going to go on to help analyze the data, find better insights to the data, find how that correlates to something else that's going on that people weren't perhaps aware of yet. We were talking about this over lunch. I think it's going to be a big thing. And I think that every company needs to be getting involved in it right now. If not, I think most companies are going to miss the boat. And I think right now it's just finding the best places that it fits into each organization, as well as the healthcare system itself. Because inevitably is what we began this podcast with, right? It's data that helps a provider or a consumer slash patient make the best decisions for their healthcare. And I think that as long as the AI is vetted, as long as the data is good, I think it's going to lead to better health outcomes for all of our population and honestly better decision making as an individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
we've started playing with, back then we called it machine learning, supervised machine learning, but we started working with our colon cancer data and with our patient data with supervised machine learning almost a decade ago, about 2018. I remember starting to work on this. So we've been very intent on implementing data analytics tools into the diagnostic process. And we've been, looking at that for the last 8 years and have made a lot of strides ourselves in that field.
any thoughts on the future with diagnostics in terms of maybe what maybe lay people are talking about, or things that you see on the horizon? We may have touched upon it right there with the AI component, but anything else that you're tuning into that may not be obvious to others?
I think honestly, just the you had touched on it, but I can, kind of reemphasize it more. I think it's the ability to have every provider, every consumer, every patient, every health system have better and better data, information, and better ability to intake the information, digest it, and actually come to a knowledgeable next step as to what that process is going to be, whatever the case may be. I think it's very much going to lead to better healthcare and to better outcomes for everyone. And I think what you'll see when you look back on this podcast 3 5 years from now is kind of exactly that.
Yeah. And I like to call it kind of democratizing diagnostics, if you will. We have lived in this world, especially post-pandemic, where we're getting this care delivered to our homes. Like, I can now run out to the drugstore and pick up a little test if my kid has the sniffles. And then I can call a telehealth doc on my phone and do a quick video chat with my son and have some antibiotics or whatever if it's strep throat, right? Or whatever the case,
Sure.
Tamiflu. That is going to start happening more and more with more advanced diseases. We are going to see complex lab testing get closer to the point of care and eventually over the counter into the home. And I think, when wearables, everything that we're doing here, I think is, to your point, Jay, is going to get integrated to where we're going to have awesome data analytics and ability to understand what our health status is and how to make it better in our own house without even leaving the comfort of your bed. You'd be sitting on your phone and doing it.
Exactly. That's, I think, what we're going to see, Phil, is kind of this integration of all of these points from all these various sources. We see it now. I've got an Apple Watch. Some people have an Oura Ring. It's having all this data consumed in one place to, like I said before, kind of create where you're at and where you need to go next to have a better understanding of what's going on.
Or a ring, and then you add our biomarkers, and now you've got everything.
There with all the mention of the
Yeah.
wearables and tracking, and I go back and forth with, I appreciate data, but I also try to, at times, I also appreciate simplicity. And, people will, not to have a tangent, people will ask me about supplements or whatnot, and they may be a smoker. I'm like, can you just eat some broccoli and some carrots? Can we just start there?
Yeah. It's funny. We used to do talks here locally on just gut health, right? And I had this guy, he was a short order cook. He's flipping food every day. And he says, I got 5 seconds to go eat a lunch. I go straight to the soda machine and refill my soda. I said, well, why don't you just hit the water button instead of the soda button? That one little change
Yes.
could help get some sugar out of your diet. That could help, so like you said, Phil, it's small things will start adding up.
Yeah.
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 Well, no, sorry. Well, you make me think it even on the spot. I mean, I think that's where we're going. We're going after kind of simplicity. I think as the technology evolves, both in, how we run diagnostics, in the results of the diagnostics, in the shareable information, as well as, and I think this plays a part in the lifestyles that we're already leading in some of the younger populations where they're more attuned to be, healthy, have a better lifestyle. Already we see this in kind of the teens these days doing things that I should have done when I was in my teens. I think that all of these things are kind of playing a part to, the hope for kind of a better future of the health of the population. And hopefully that's where this is going to go.
Yeah. That's a great segue for my final question. For each of you, what do you hope your legacy will be in relation to your job and your impact in healthcare?
Well, I got to think of that.
Well, I mean, I can simplify as far as legacy. I hope I did do a good job, inevitably not just for my career, but I've done something special. And, he had mentioned it earlier, and this was going to be my answer. I've been in diagnostics for 20 years, and never once up until I came here did someone pick up the phone, but more than once has someone rung us up on the phone and said, "You saved my life." And it's not a soapbox. Like when you hear that for the first time, like it gives you meaning. And if I can continue to do that and I can continue to close the screening gap, that's enough.
Yeah, I would echo that. My dad a long time ago taught me, if you just do good work and do what you think is best, and do good things for good people, the money will follow, right? Don't go chasing the money. Do good stuff. Do good for the world. And yeah, he was also a healthcare provider, so that was his mentality. But I've tried to live by that as best as I can. Don't always live up to that, but I try to. And so I think that's kind of the legacy, is that we can count how many people we've helped. We can see the incidence and mortality go down. And somebody someday says, hey, Eric and Jay, they were a part of building that. I think that'd be a great legacy to leave behind.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you both for coming on today. Thank you for spending some time with us. Where can our listeners go to learn more about New Day Diagnostics?
Well, I would prefer, instead of newdaydiagnostics.com, you go to Colo Healthy with a Y, Colo Healthy Club. We all will make the whole world Colo Healthy. And if this test is right for you and the provider on the back end says you're eligible, we'd love to have you take this screening test, because it's easy, it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's pretty damn accurate.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Thanks, Jay, Eric. Thank you so much for coming on, spending some time with us, and sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Best of luck in the year ahead.
Thanks, sir.
Stay tuned for another episode of the HealthCast. Thank you.